هلو گایز، چطورین بچه‌ها؟ خوش اومدین به یه ویدیو دیگه. این بار اومدیم با پارت 6 داستان هایی واقعی که بازخورد خوبی هم داشته تو چنل. پس اگه این ویدیو رو دوست داشتین حتما این ویدیو رو لایک کنید، چنل رو هم سابسکرایب کنید، زنگوله بغلش هم بزنید. اینستاگرام من این بالا میاد، حتما اینجا ما رو فالو کنید. زودتر 1000 تا شیم، هم تو اینستا هم توی یوتیوب. پس بدون معطلی let's play.
This happened when I was 8 years old. I was a hyperactive kid in my childhood.
یک لحظه صدا خیلی بلنده، لازم صدا رو کمتر کنم. درست.
My parents spoiled me to such an extent that I also never hesitated to bully kids less than my age. In a few words, I wasn't a good kid back then. My mom never denied anything that I put my hands into, and my dad thought giving everything to a child is the key to raising them in the right way. How terribly wrong they were. I couldn't make many friends as all the kids in the neighborhood saw me as a menace. Even though their parents complained about my cruel behavior, my parents ignored them and went on saying, I am the best and other kids are just jealous of me. Let me tell you this, when a parent hides the fault of their kid and encourages them even though they are wrong, that kid can never grow up to be a good human being.
اینو بدی اونو بدی اینو بخری اونو بخری. خب بچه لوس میشه مثلا من نمیخوام باش بشه بریم برات بخرم. خب تهش همین میشه دیگه. بعد بچه من مثلا بری مثلا یارو نگه رفتم آدم کشتم، حتی آدم نکشتی، اون اومد جلوی چاقو رفت تو شکمش. اینجوری میخوان قانع کنم بقیه رو.
My parents made me believe that I own this world, and no matter how many wrongful deeds I do, they'll always My parents made me believe that I own this world, and no matter how many wrongful deeds I do, they'll always be there to save my ass. It was prior to Halloween. The entire town was getting decked up with Halloween decorations. As usual, being the rich, spoiled kid, my dad brought me props enough to cover a huge mansion. I was hanging a huge jack-o'-lantern on the porch when I saw a few neighboring kids gathering on the side of the road talking among themselves. What are you guys up to for tonight? I asked them. Nothing. Just planning which house to hit first for trick-or-treating. Can I come with you guys? No. Leave us alone, you freak. Honestly, that was the first time I realized how everyone hates me except my parents. And trust me, it wasn't a good feeling at all. But I was only 8 and I had no one who could tell me where I was going wrong. Because to my parents, I can never be wrong. I ran to my room, cried in the bathroom for some time, and then went into a full-on raging mode. I decided I will go trick-or-treating alone and I will collect the highest number of candy, more than any other kid. As the night fell, every kid set out on their candy quest, dressing in various Halloween costumes. I lit up all the candles of my pumpkin heads with my dad and went to get ready for my personal adventure. I didn't tell them that the other kids have discarded me to avoid any interference from my parents in this matter. I dressed as Count Dracula. My dad bought me a nice cap with a red collar just like the Count wears. I took my bucket and went out on the road. Kids were in front of every house. I could hear them scream in joy. Trick or treat, let them be. I will collect on my own. I started walking up to the houses and asking for candy. Because of the notorious reputation that I created in this town, no house owner gave me more than 2 pieces of candy that were too small.
همین میشه دیگه. وقتی توی کفر رو زیاد دوست میکنن و کلن علیهش نمیاد، مثلا بگن آره اشتباه از ما بوده، ما بچه رو بعد چی میگن تربیت کردیم. این همین میشه. بچه داخل جامعه بدبختش. حالا جامعه حالا نبوده.
One house owner even said, "Why are you asking for candy? Couldn't your dad buy a store? Get off my porch, you rich brat." Tears rolled down my eyes as I couldn't take that anymore. I ran away to hide my miserable self. I ran amidst the woods on that moonlit Halloween night. I didn't care where I was going. I never thought for once that at this hour, the woods aren't safe for an 8-year-old. After running for 10 minutes straight, I sat up.
10 دقیقه چجوری دوید؟ اینجاست من دارم. 10 دقیقه چجوری تونست بدوه؟
Under a bushy tree and began to sob. I don't know how long I went like that. My concentration broke, hearing two voices coming from a close distance. I got up and saw a small wooden house lurking at some distance. I could see shadows of a man and a woman on the other side of the window curtain, as pale yellow light illuminated them arguing over something. I slowly walked to the house and read the name of the gate, Mr. and Mrs. Ginsburg. The reason I have never heard about them is that they live on the outskirts. I went to the main door and heard them arguing. I am never going to leave you the key. You're a bloody junkie. You don't deserve my hard-earned money. Oh, really? You were living in my house. Don't forget that, old hag. Saying this, Mr. Ginsburg slapped his wife, and I heard her screaming while she fell on the floor. The fight got more intense, and I was thinking of returning home when I peeked one last time from the porch window. The curtain on the window was tattered from one corner, and I could see inside the house clearly from there. Just then, my eyes discovered a bowl full of candy lying on the dining table. I knew it would be easy for me to get candy from them, as they won't recognize me. Being the adamant kid I was, I rang the doorbell and heard footsteps stomping on the floor. A rusty-looking man opened the door and exhaled a cloud of smoke from his foul-smelling cigar. What do you want? Trick or treat? There's no treat here. Get lost, you piglet. Saying this, the man slammed the door hard in my face. This is my only chance not to return home empty-handed, so I came up with a plan. I went to the other side of the house, searching for the back door. Luckily, there was a dog door adjacent to the back door. I knew they didn't have any dogs because, since I've come here, I haven't heard a single bark. I stood near the back door silently, waiting for one single chance. They were still in the living room, so I knew if I entered the house now, they would definitely catch me. Screaming and shouting, Miss Ginsburg stormed upstairs and her husband too followed. Finally, I thought. I crouched down and entered the house from the dog door. Their arguing voices could still be heard from upstairs. The house had a weird stench, like something had died in there. I thought it better not to waste my time, so I slowly crawled under the dining table and sat there for a few seconds more. When I got absolutely sure that they were not coming downstairs soon, I grabbed the bowl from the table and poured all the candy into my bucket. It was filled with all kinds of sweetness. I even got a big chocolate bar. After emptying the entire bowl, I put it over the table carefully and was about to go back just like I came in, when a terrifying scream took place, followed by a loud gunshot. After that, everything got quiet. My heart skipped a beat. Oh my God. Before I could act on this matter, I heard footsteps rushing down the stairs. Out of options, I ran to the living room and rolled under the couch. I saw a pair of rusty brown boots going towards the kitchen sink and opening the tap in a hurry. There was no confusion in me that this man is none other than Mr. Ginsburg. I noticed his boots the first time I saw him. I could hear him washing his hands vigorously. He then walked to the main door and locked it. He did the same thing with the back door as well, and then again went upstairs. Holy crap. Now I can't even walk out from the main door. If he heard me trying to unlock his door, I would be in great trouble. Being an 8-year-old, I tried to keep calm and think about how to get out of this situation. I thought to walk back to the back door again and sneak out from the dog door, but before I could come out, I heard a heavy sound. Something was being dragged down the stairs. Something heavy, as I could hear Mr. Ginsburg's grunting noises like he was pulling down a huge load. There's no way I can walk to the back door now because the stairs face the back door. Lying down under the couch, I saw Mr. Ginsburg dragging down the body of a person. It was none other than his wife, who was alive a few moments back. Dragging her blood-drenched body, Mr. Ginsburg placed it parallelly to the living room couch. Her wide, silent eyes kept staring at me as blood poured out from her open mouth. I was in complete panic. Even though I wanted to, I couldn't cry because that'll make me this madman's next target. The draining blood started to come in my direction, and I slid away to avoid getting touched by it. But after a point, there was no space, and the warm, thick blood turned my white sleeves red. It was the most horrific experience of my life. I then heard Mr. Ginsburg stop near the dining table for a moment. Suddenly, he turned around and said in a grumpy voice, "Did you steal my candies, little piglet?" Oh my God, he knows now. There's no way I am getting out of this situation alive. Come on out, little piglet. I won't hurt you. I have more candy for you. Come on out now. I knew very well that this man is lying, and all he is going to give me is a painful death. He started ransacking the living room to find me. One by one, he was pulling and kicking all the furniture as he realized I was hiding somewhere. As soon as he came near the couch, I jumped out before he could grab me and kicked him in the nuts. He crouched down in pain, and I ran towards the dog door, hovering in fear. I almost came out when he shot at me one more time, but luckily, he missed. The bullet went through my high neck cape, saving my life. I didn't look back, didn't stop because I could hear footsteps chasing me in those dark woods. When I finally saw the lights of our town, I could hear my parents yelling my name. Seeing me gone for such a long time must have worried them. I saw my dad standing in the road, and I ran to him and fainted in his arms. I woke up in my room, surrounded by cops and my sobbing parents. They noticed the bullet hole in my cape and thought some maniac tried to kidnap me. But I told the cops everything I saw in that house. Obviously, Mr. Ginsburg realized I will spit out everything about the crime, so he escaped right away, leaving his dead wife in that house. The cops searched the house, and along with the corpse of Miss Ginsburg, found a rotten dead body of a German Shepherd in their bathroom tub. Mr. Ginsburg is still on the list of most wanted, and I never went trick-or-treating after that. I also changed my behavior and became a quiet kid. I stopped going out much because the last time I entered the wrong house, I almost got killed.
نایس، خوب بود. نسبت به پارت قبل خیلی بهتر بود. شروع طوفانی اصلا در حد بوندسلیگا.
Every year on October 31st, I feel nothing but crippling fear. In truth, I'm not afraid of the supposed ghouls that roam the night. Neither am I afraid of the evil demons that come.
اگه مثل قسمت قبلی جذاب باشه واقعا ارزش داره. چرا این شبیه زن است؟ واقعا قبلی خیانت کرده بود، زده بود آتیش زده بود شوهرش اون و رفیقشو.
To take us in the scary tales we tell. There's nothing I fear more than the pitter-patter of little children's feet roaming the street asking for candy. And this gruesome experience will tell you why. This incident happened 3 years ago. I had just bought a newly remodeled house. As I stood in the hallway of my new home, only 2 words ran through my mind. It's beautiful. I had been eyeing the house for a while now and immediately got an opportunity to buy it. I did. The house wasn't only beautiful, it had a reasonable price too, as apparently it had been.
من نمیفهمم چرا وقتی یه خونه بزرگ تازه ساخت و میبینن و اینکه قیمت چرا باید پایین باشه اینا میرن میخرن. هر فیلمی دیدیم رو خونه تازه ساختی بودش، بعد اینکه تا بچی هم بودش ارزون. خب چجور وقتی تازه ساخت ارزون داره بهت میده؟ اینقدر بزرگه این خونه. بذار فکر کنیم.
In a terrible fire, one of which I didn't know the details of. But due to that incident, the house's value was reduced, thus making it cheap, which was one of my incentives to get it in the first place. Buying the house and moving into a new neighborhood was the beginning of a fresh start for me and my 1-year-old daughter, Elizabeth Foster. Being a single mother wasn't easy, but my little baby girl was the light of my life, and I swore to give her the best that I could. The first few months were nothing but perfect. I had completely settled down, and I had made a lot of friends around the neighborhood. After the summer, autumn was fast approaching, and with it, the Halloween season. Decorations began to go up, and I became excited to spend my first Halloween in the new neighborhood. It was on the 31st of October, 2013. The day started out great, as people in costumes filled the streets. By the time it was 5:30, I began to hear knocking at the door. I opened up to see the cutest children in costume.
پنجونیم چه الان اینجوری 2013 که پنجونیم نباید انقدر تاریک باشه. کجایی؟
And with a big smile, they said, "Trick or treat."
جان من. شیرینی یا شیطنت؟ یعنی سلطان دوبله.
Trick or treat?
سلطان زیرنویس.
I gladly obliged, and I gave them as much candy as I could. The following hours went the same way as the knocks on the door just kept coming. I didn't complain as the sight warmed my heart, and I began to think how adorable my own daughter would be when she's old enough to dress up and go out for her first trick-or-treating. I stayed up giving out candy till it was really late, and at around 10 p.m., the knocks on the door had stopped. I realized I was out of candy, and I decided to call it a night. So I turned off the lights before going to check on my sleeping daughter in her room. After that, I brushed my teeth and I went to bed.
چجوری تو تاریکی اینا میتونن همه کار کنن؟ من 5 تا چراغ روشن میکنم که فقط از اینجا برم سرویس بهداشتی یا آشپزخونه. چه وضعشه؟
I didn't sleep for long before I was abruptly awoken by loud knocks at the door. I looked at the clock beside my bed and it was 12:01 a.m. Perplexed at who was knocking at this hour, I went down to check. I opened the door to see 2 children. It was dark, so I couldn't make out their faces well. The first child was a boy who I assumed was 9 years old, and he held the hand of the second child, a 5-year-old girl who I assumed was his sister. Before I could say anything, they both said, "Trick or treat," in unison. I was completely baffled to see children out at this time, as it was extremely late, so I blurted out, "Whoa, it's really late, kids. I'm guessing you guys should go home. I'm all out of candy." I couldn't see their faces well, but I could tell that they were angry at the fact that I didn't have any candy to give them. So they frowned their faces and said, "Trick or treat." I could notice the anger in their voice as they said, and I began to get scared.
اگه ویدیو بچه‌های چسیه من این بالا همین بالا میاد، هم تو دیسکریپشن هست، هم میتونید توی پلیلیست.
So I said, "You kids should really go home. It's not safe out here, and it's no time for pranks." Nothing but silence answered me as the children stood there staring at me with a hint of anger in their eyes. I assumed they were still trying to pull a prank, so I bid them goodnight before closing the door. I began to make my way upstairs, thinking about how odd the recent occurrence was, and before I could reach my room, I began to hear noises coming from the kitchen. Thinking they were burglars, I rushed down to see what was going on. I reached there to see the 2 children I just saw outside inside my kitchen, and one of them now held a lighter in their hand. The smell of gas began to fill the room as I looked to the gas cooker and realized it was on full blast. Before I could utter a single word, I heard the sound of the lighter, and I watched my house go up in flames. Within seconds, the fire had spread everywhere as I was surrounded by flames. I watched in horror as my home began to burn. I looked forward to see the children, who were now engulfed in flames, begin to laugh. I watched as the fire peeled off their skin and the smell of burning flesh began to fill the room. But to my horror, the children who were still completely unfazed continued to laugh as they were burnt alive. The scene was ghastly and it transfixed me for a while. I began to hear little screams from upstairs and I realized my daughter was still in her room. "Lizzie!" Before rushing upstairs to her room, before I could reach the door, a huge chunk of burning debris fell from the roof and blocked my path. I tried to maneuver the blockade, but there was no way as the entrance was completely blocked. I tried to get back down the stairs to get some help, but the stairway was blocked too as the flames were everywhere and the ceiling had begun to crumble around me. In that moment, I felt nothing but helplessness, hopelessness, and despair as her screams filled the house. Nothing in this world can be compared to what I was feeling as I heard her die and not being able to do anything about it. The pain was unbearable as I was her mother, and in some way, I also felt her die. The smoke began to rise and breathing became extremely hard. I began to choke as I fell to the floor. The world around me began to fade away, and I was beginning to give in. I felt arms grab a hold of me and pick me up from the floor. The following seconds were a blur. But before I knew it, I was out of the house and surrounded by firefighters. I began to scream. "My daughter is still inside! Help her!" They began to rush back in, but the house began to collapse on itself, and I knew that it was hopeless. As I watched the house crumble with my daughter in it, I felt a piece of me die, and I couldn't do anything but cry my heart out. After a while, my grief began to turn into anger as I cursed the children who did it. I decided to call the cops, as with my daughter gone, the only thing I could get now was justice. They escorted me to the police station, and I gave them my statement. They looked at me like I was crazy when I explained to them that the children were laughing as they burnt alive. But I stuck to my story as I knew what I saw. The cops checked the house, and they said they only found the corpse of my 1-year-old daughter, and no other bodies were found. Knowing that they escaped made me more angry, so I demanded that they were found and brought to justice. I was then told to describe the children to the police sketch artist. I tried my best to tell them every detail I could remember, as I didn't see the children well. It took about 3 hours for the sketches to be finished. When it was done, all the cops looked baffled as they saw the final sketch. I was confused as they all began to look at me like I was mad. The elderly cop then asked me, "Are you sure these are the children you saw?" Angered and frustrated, I screamed back, "Yes, it's them. I know what I saw. Now can you please find them and bring them to justice?" The cop then looked at me and said, "Well, that's impossible, ma'am, because if these are the kids you saw, I can assure you that they couldn't have done it, as I knew them very well." I knew something was wrong when he used the word knew, but before I could say anything, he continued with, "These kids perfectly match the description of the Johnsons children, and the Johnsons are the family who formerly lived in the house that you currently reside in. I can assure you that it is completely impossible that these kids were responsible for the fire, as the family had all horrifically died in a similar house fire 5 years ago." Completely baffled and with nothing to say, I stood up and left the station. While I knew it defied all logic that dead children were responsible for the arson, a part of me believed it, as the odd things I saw that night began to make sense to me. After burying my daughter, I left town to move back in with my mother. Most days I tell myself that it's too bad there's no justice system for the restless spirits that roam the world, as there was nothing I could do to find solace. Sometimes I find myself thinking back to that day and wishing I had given them some candy, as I knew that if I did, they would have left me and my daughter alone. I hope my story is a lesson to all of you, as I urge you to fill your house this October with candy and treats to give, as it's better to give a treat than to experience the gruesome trick.
درس اخلاقی این قسمت 2 تا درس داشت. یکی اینکه خونه‌تون هنگام چیپ میگن چی میگن نمیدونم پر شکلات باشه. 2 اینکه خونه‌های ارزون و تازه ساخت نو رو دیگه نخرید که قبلا هم تو آتش سوزی رو چون احتمال داره جن اونا بیان بخورن. خیلی ممنون که این ویدیو رو تماشا کردین. اگه این ویدیو رو دوست داشتین حتما این ویدیو رو لایک کنید، کانال منم سابسکرایب کنید، زنگوله بغلش هم بزنید، چنل اینستا منم بالای تصویر میاد، حتما اونجا ما رو فالو کنید. سوشال مدیای دیگه مثل توییتر، تویچ و ردیت توی دیسکریپشن هست، حتما اونا سر بزنید. پس تا ویدیوی بعدی پیس.